I was born in the coastal village of Tosa, where the sea was both our master and our cradle. We lived by its moods, prayed to it for fish, and feared its sudden tempests. In the 12th year of the reign of our shogun, I was but a sailor aboard a small trading vessel bound for the islands of the south, when a storm unlike any I had known swallowed us whole. For 7 days we drifted like a broken leaf upon an endless grey expanse. On the 8th morning the sky opened to reveal not the familiar waters of Nippon, but a vast unknown sea. We had crossed the barrier the shogunate had forbidden, and thus became exiles without crime. When the storm finally relented, we saw a ship on the horizon, black, taller than a temple, exhaling smoke like a dragon. It was an American whaler. Their language was a thunderous noise to us, but their gestures were kind, and they offered food, dry clothes, and something called coffee, dark and bitter as sin itself. At first I thought these men were demons. Their eyes were blue as winter skies, their beards like tangled seaweed, their laughter shaking the very air. They wore boots of black leather that creaked when they walked, and carried small metal tubes that spat fire and noise, yet they did not harm us. Instead, they treated us with curiosity, as if we were strange birds brought aboard for study. When they learned we came from Japan, a land closed to foreigners, they grew excited, asking questions we could not answer. Through gestures and drawings, they told us they would take us east, across the ocean, to their homeland. I trembled, for no man of our islands had ever gone so far. To cross the sea of the setting sun was to leave the world of the living and sail into myth. The voyage took many weeks. I lost count of the days as the sun rose and fell upon the same horizon. The sailors sang constantly, coarse, joyous songs of women, rum, and storms. They drank endlessly and yet did not die. They ate salted meat from barrels, biscuits as hard as wood, and a strange white paste called bread. Their ship, driven not by wind but by fire, seemed alive, its belly rumbling like thunder, its iron heart never resting. I thought often of home, of my mother's quiet prayers and the soft rhythm of waves against our shore. But as the air grew colder and the stars shifted to unfamiliar patterns, I realized that I was being carried beyond the reach of our gods. One dawn, I awoke to a roar that shook my chest. Ahead, rising from the mist, was a coastline unlike any I had imagined. Towers of stone and smoke stretched into the heavens. 100 ships lay anchored before a harbour so vast that mountains seemed to bow before it. "America!" the sailors shouted, their voices filled with pride. I saw houses made not of wood and paper, but of brick and iron. Great beasts with wheels and long tails hissed along the streets, spewing white steam as they ran. Bells rang from unseen towers, and bridges arched over rivers like the spines of sleeping dragons. The smell was of smoke and oil mixed with salt and life. I could not move. My knees weakened, as though I stood before a god. When they brought us ashore, I expected the people to stare at us as curiosities, and they did. Crowds gathered, pointing, laughing, calling us Japs and castaways. But there was no malice in their eyes, only wonder. They reached out to touch our robes, our hair, our faces. Children ran beside us, shouting words we could not understand. We were taken to a building larger than any daimyo's palace I had seen, with columns like temple gates and windows of clear stone. There, men in black coats spoke rapidly, and another man wrote with a quill that danced like a bird across the paper. We were told that we were now guests of the United States. I did not know if that meant freedom or another kind of prison. That first night on land, I could not sleep. From the small window of my room, I saw lights glowing far into the distance, more lights than there were stars in the sky. The city hummed like an enormous hive. Machines rumbled beneath the earth, and steam curled into the night air from every corner. The people moved without fear in the dark, trusting these lights as though they were divine. I thought of the fishermen of Tosa, who lit their way with a single lantern and prayed to the sea for mercy. Here, the sea itself seemed conquered. I whispered the names of my ancestors to remind myself I was still a son of Japan, though I now stood in a world where the very elements obeyed man. The Americans spoke often of progress. They said it proudly, as if it were a god's name. I did not understand what it meant then, but I saw its shape in everything, in the ships that breathed fire, the bridges that defied rivers, and the carriages that ran without horses. I was both awed and frightened. If such things were possible, what place remained for our way of life? For our temples, our silence, our bowing before the wind and tide? As I closed my eyes, I felt the ocean between our worlds widen, and I knew that even if I returned home, I would never again belong wholly to the old Japan. The morning after our arrival, I stepped out into the streets of the American city. The air was thick with a strange haze that smelled of iron and burning oil. Above me loomed walls of brick and glass that swallowed the sky, their faces glinting in the sunlight. Carts and carriages rolled endlessly across cobblestone streets, drawn by horses that clattered like drums. But what stunned me most were the cars that moved without horses, boxes of iron powered by invisible fire. Their wheels turned faster than any beast could run, and they shrieked with a noise that split the air. I watched them pass in disbelief, their passengers seated calmly inside, reading papers as if this sorcery were an ordinary thing. The people here did not bow to the world, they commanded it. Everywhere I looked, I saw movement. Men shouted from doorways, bells rang, and smoke poured from chimneys like offerings to a new god. There were shops selling everything imaginable: clocks, shoes, lamps, pictures, books, even tiny machines that played music. I saw a man on a street corner turning a box that sang a tune like a festival flute. Children danced around him, laughing. In Japan, the air is filled with the sound of cicadas. Here, it was the sound of invention. I felt as if I stood inside the beating heart of some great creature. Its pulse was the hammer of metal, the hiss of steam, and the constant murmur of thousands of voices. Even the wind carried the taste of progress, dry and sharp on my tongue. The Americans were unlike any people I had known. They walked with a quick, purposeful stride, their faces open and unguarded. They spoke loudly, as if each word had to claim its place in the air before vanishing. They shook hands instead of bowing, meeting eyes directly, a habit that unsettled me. To look so boldly into another's gaze felt like an act of war. Yet there was warmth in it too, a kind of easy confidence that came from never having to fear one's station. I learned that even the poorest man could speak freely to the richest, and that they called each other Sir or Mr, regardless of rank. In their eyes, a man's worth came not from his birth, but from what he could do with his own two hands. To me, raised in the silence of hierarchy, this was both frightening and strangely beautiful. One afternoon I was taken to a great hall filled with people listening to a man speak from a wooden platform. He shouted of liberty, of justice, of a country born from the courage of its citizens. The crowd roared back, waving flags striped red and white, with stars that glittered like a night sky. I could not understand all his words, but I felt the fire in them. These people believed in something larger than any emperor or shogun, a belief that power came from the hearts of men, not from the heavens above. It was madness, I thought, yet there was a kind of holiness in their madness. When the speech ended, They sang a song together, voices joined as one. I wept quietly, not from understanding, but from the raw force of it. At night I walked with my American host through streets lined with lamps that glowed without flame. They called it electric light. It was cold and steady, like moonlight trapped inside glass. Under this ghostly glow, lovers strolled, shopkeepers swept their doorways, and trains rumbled beneath the earth. "We fear no darkness here," my host said proudly. I nodded, but inside I trembled, for if man could banish the night itself, what boundaries remained? I thought of the paper lanterns of Kyoto, their soft flicker against the wind, fragile, human and alive. This new light did not dance. It conquered. It made the world eternal day. In the days that followed, I visited schools, factories, and even a great shipyard where men built iron vessels larger than any temple. The clang of their hammers echoed through my bones. They worked without pause, each man a single cog in a vast design. No overseer shouted at them. They drove themselves, each believing his labor fed the greatness of the nation. When I asked a worker if he did not tire, he smiled through his sweat and said, "We build for our children." That simple phrase struck me harder than any sermon. In Japan, we work to honor our ancestors. Here they work to shape descendants they would never meet. Their gaze was always forward, never backward. On my 6th night, I was taken to a tall building where men gathered around tables covered in food, meat roasted brown, potatoes cooked in butter, bread still steaming. They offered me a cup of red liquid called wine. It burned my throat but warmed my belly, and soon I laughed with them as though we were comrades. They told stories of storms and battles, of families left behind, of a country that stretched farther than the eye could see. When I mentioned Japan, their eyes lit up with curiosity, not fear. One man said, "Your people will join the world soon. You'll see. The age of steam leaves no one behind." I smiled, though I did not know whether to feel hope or dread. That night, as I lay in a bed softer than any tatami mat, I could still hear the endless heartbeat of the city beyond my window. Steady, relentless, alive. When I first came to America, I thought I was witnessing a kind of sorcery. Fire trapped in lamps, voices carried through wires, ships made of iron that floated like wood. But as the days passed, I began to see that beneath all this wonder was something far simpler. Hunger. Not hunger for food or comfort, but for progress. The Americans seemed driven by an endless desire to outdo themselves. Each invention led to another, each success to a greater ambition. They called this the spirit of enterprise. To me, it felt like standing before a storm that never rested. Back home, our people prized harmony, to find one's place within the world. Here, the people sought to master it. They did not wait for the tides to turn. They built engines to defy them. One morning, I was shown the harbour where ships the size of mountains lay tethered like beasts. Their decks bristled with cannons, their funnels poured smoke into the sky. My host told me these vessels could cross the entire ocean without sails, powered only by coal. I placed my hand on their iron hulls and felt the vibration of hidden fire within. In that moment, I realized that no nation untouched by this new force could hope to remain free for long. These ships were not mere tools. They were messengers of an age that would claim the seas themselves. I thought of Japan's wooden junks, their sails patched by fishermen, and I felt a chill that no sun could warm. The world was changing, and we were still dreaming beneath the cherry blossoms, yet for all their power, I saw that the Americans were not without flaws. Beneath their pride lay a strange restlessness, as if even their victories brought them no peace. Men spoke of freedom, yet I saw beggars in the streets and workers coughing in the smoke of factories. They claimed all men were equal, Yet the faces of the labourers told another story, pale with exhaustion, eyes dulled by repetition. I asked one of them if he loved his work. He laughed bitterly and said, "It keeps me fed." That night I wrote in my journal that even the strongest nations carry their own diseases, not of the body, but of the soul. They conquer the world, only to become slaves to their own machines. Still, I could not help but admire them. Their courage was raw, unrefined, but genuine. They believed the future belonged to them, and because they believed it, perhaps it would. When I spoke of Japan's isolation, one man told me, "You cannot keep the ocean out forever." His words struck me deeply. Our islands, so proud in their solitude, now seemed fragile, like paper walls before a rising wind. I thought of our samurai, men bound by honor and silence, facing a world that shouted louder with each passing year. Could we stand against such noise, or would we be swallowed by it? I did not know. But I understood then that the sea which once protected us would soon deliver the world to our shores. As my time in America came to an end, I climbed a hill overlooking the harbour. The sun was setting behind the factories, painting the smoke in colours of blood and gold. I watched as a steamer left the dock, its whistle echoing across the water. The sight filled me with both awe and sorrow, for I knew that when I returned home, I would carry with me more than memories. I would carry a warning. Japan could no longer remain a dream preserved in silence. The world beyond the horizon had awakened, and its footsteps were growing louder every day. The wind that once whispered through bamboo now roared with engines. To survive, we too would have to learn its language. When our ship departed, I stood on deck and watched the American coast fade into mist. My heart felt torn between two worlds, one ancient and disciplined, the other wild and boundless. I thought of my ancestors, who had never seen beyond the islands of our birth, and wondered what they would think of this new age. The ocean that once seemed infinite now felt small, like a bridge between past and future. For the first time, I did not fear its vastness. I feared instead the day it would no longer divide us. The Americans had shown me what humanity could achieve when it refused to be content, but also what it might lose in the process. I prayed that Japan would find a way to embrace the fire without being consumed by it. As we neared home, I saw the coast of Kyushu rising from the fog, the same green hills, the same fishing boats, the same temple bells echoing through the air. Yet everything looked different to me now, smaller, quieter, as if caught between two breaths. I realized then that the world I had left no longer existed, not truly. Once a man has seen the cities of smoke and thunder, he cannot return unchanged. When I set foot on Japanese soil again, I felt both gratitude and grief, for I had glimpsed the future, and it was magnificent, terrifying, and unstoppable.